And welcome everyone. Again, this is what is today? November 22nd. Gosh. And already. And for Perfect Connections, it's great to see everybody. Let's go around. Please introduce yourself and what district that you're in. And then please share if there's anything, I'll be noting in the chat as well, if there's anything that you would like to talk about today. And I will start with Nancy Trahey. Oh, I'm Susan Walker, by the way, formerly with the University of Minnesota and now in my house. So, Nancy Trahey.
I'm Nancy Trahey. I am the licensed parent, one of the licensed parenting educators for Albany School District, and also a home visitor. And I don't have a specific topic, but I would like to suggest that maybe in the interest of time, in this first 15-minute time, is there a way for us to have those ground rules that I'm so glad to have those from last week's discussion because I couldn't participate, Susan. Maybe there's a way to make a quick like something to put in the chat. Of course, people who are joining later then can't see it, can they?
No, but it's a simple copy and paste for new.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. And I pass it on to Greta.
I'm Greta Nelson, and I am with Cambridge Isani School District 911, and I am a parent educator, and I coordinate screening and work with preschool as a resource at times, but I'm mostly doing my parent ed role, so in a variety of scenarios. So, Becca?
I'm Becca Coring. I'm one of two parent educators in Maplewood, which is actually Maplewood, Oakdale, North St. Paul School District 622. And I don't really have a question today. I'm just glad to be back.
Becca, you seem to be missing something.
No more neck brace. Most of the time. Yeah, I'm doing better. For those who don't know, I had emergency spinal surgery in September, so it's been a little bit of a road, both getting to the surgery and now recovering from it. But yep, I'm back. I will send it to Ellen.
Hey everybody, Ellen Hafner, parent educator, Northfield. We have no classes next week, and even my baby class, which runs every week, I won't be here because we have mandatory, like in person, not in person, Zoom letters training. So I don't want to come back to school at all next week. So I'm getting ready for my Wednesday class now. So I'll be off camera as I mean, I like to see you guys when you're chatting. But if I'm moving around, I'll be off camera. I also don't have any questions this week. So,
Do you want to turn it over to someone?
great. I'm sorry. I stepped out of the room, so I don't know who's gone. Sorry.
Dawn and I'm sorry, where is she? Right there. Naomi.
I can go next.
Okay.
I'm Dawn Hilgers, Albany Area Schools parent educator and early childhood coordinator. So that's ECFE, early childhood screening, and some of the preschool stuff. This is my first year here and my first time here to this site. I'm so excited to be in a group of all these many, many years of us all having experience and being able to share with each other. So I'm looking forward to it. I do not have a question because I didn't know I should have prepared one or had one. So I will pass it to, who did you say was left?
Naomi.
Naomi.
I'm here. I'm just taking care of some personal things. I'm Naomi Huso. I am a parent educator with Wayzata Public Schools. I teach predominantly ones and babies and twos, but I also do our outreach offsite stuff. I am curious, for those of you, I know a few of you teach non-separating one-year-old classes. We do a gradual separation process for all of our ones. We have noticed post-pandemic, a lot of parents a little less, just more maybe needs for a non-separating ones class, but I'm curious, like what ground rules do you put around topics? What topics do you discuss with a ones class, knowing that it's 12 to 24 months. So I have older kids, like 18, 19, 20 months in my classroom. I have some personal feelings on that. I just would love to hear from those of you that are teaching it. Like, what do you talk about? What ground rules do you put for parents? Like, my biggest concern is receptive language is huge and they hear us. And I want to have real, authentic parent discussions. But I also, as a parent of a highly sensitive, highly perceptive kiddo, didn't realize how much she was listening to me and how much that's influenced her as she's gotten bigger. And so I really am trying to figure out how to navigate this as we introduce some of those classes, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Naomi. What a great question. And I was thinking about you with your kiddos. Your new son is how old now?
I have my son just turned 9 months yesterday, and then I have a 2.5-year-old. They're exactly 2 years apart, given 2 years, 8 days apart. So she'll be 3 in February. So yeah, I have a lot going on in my life, and yeah, I'm just curious from like a parent ed perspective. I think back on who she is as a person and her temperament, and just she's very precocious. I've been told time and time again by pediatricians, she's very precocious. She's very perceptive. And now as she's fully verbal, she says things to me that worry me a little bit.
Hmm.
So I'm just curious because like I didn't realize she was listening to all the things you're talking about around her. And some of those things have internalized. And so just curious.
So does everybody understand Naomi's question to be able to support her and add any, first of all, does anybody have any questions for Naomi to clarify? You all seem cool, right? Okay, good. Okay. All right. So
Well, I can add, I just got done teaching one of our two ones and twos classes, one now in the fall and one in the spring. And I find it interesting that your parents are less eager to separate because this group, I told them we will gradually separate and the timing will be up to you guys. And they said to me, how soon? How soon can we separate? So I don't, right? And that's wonderful because I like you, Naomi, I would prefer for us to have some of these conversations not right there where the kids are. And I'm not sure I've addressed that. Your question is causing me to reflect that maybe I haven't addressed that as directly as I could have in the past by saying to parents, while the kids are with us, that we should be mindful that they do hear us, that their receptive language is really very good. And we do have conversations about how their speech, it's one of the things usually parents are saying, I'm so excited about their speech development. When I ask them, what are you excited about at this particular stage of your child's life, their development? Language comes up. And so it seems to me that would open a door for me to say, yes, I observe those same kinds of things with you and your children, that they are hearing and understanding and maybe trying to repeat more of what we're saying than we realize. And so if I did that early on in a class, maybe that would give me an opportunity to say, so how does that inform us as we're talking about topics that might be something that you wouldn't want your child to internalize or repeat? Does that make sense?
It
Yes.
totally makes sense. Yeah, I feel like very much on the same page, Nancy, especially since I missed the first almost 2 months of school. So like I had a sub who was kind of laying ground rules and setting up group norms and things like that, which is awkward to just jump in midway into a group. I have a ones class. It's actually my Friday morning class. It's a tiny group which in some ways makes it a little easier. It's less chaotic. It's actually kind of a chill group, which is unusual for ones. Um, but we haven't really addressed it. And I'm thinking like that's part of why I didn't jump. I'm usually jump right in with an answer. It's part of why I didn't just jump right in with an answer because I haven't done enough of that. Um, in this particular group for the ones anyway, they are almost entirely playing on the other side of the room and not seeming to pay any attention to us. But we all know that, what they look like they're doing is not always reflective of what's going on inside their minds. So yeah, I think that would actually be a really interesting thing to even just talk about. uh, I think you could have a whole lesson on it and talking about like what do you remember overhearing when you were a kid? What do you wish you hadn't heard? What what is good to overhear? I think kids need to overhear their parents bragging about them. Think there are certain things, you know what I mean? There are certain things that you want them to overhear and other things you don't. And how can we keep this classroom a safe place for the little ears too? I think that's a fantastic topic. I haven't ever addressed it directly like that though. Um, I think in general, I try to gear conversations very much towards the parent. So like those like I statements, like what are you experiencing? And we talk about family of origin quite a bit and stuff like that. So it's a little less straight up like little Johnny is doing this and this and this. And I wish that, so there's a little less direct uh talking about something that would make a little kid's ears perk up. Oh, this is about me, quite as much, but we haven't addressed it directly like that.
I'm good.
We actually don't separate until 2.5 in our program. Because those kids we've just found they're not ready, and it's really, really hard on staff when they're crying constantly. And then parents are very nervous about it. And then if one child comes in, then they all come in, it's just so we just do, yeah, we do non-separating up until 2.5. Honestly, like we don't really have deep conversations in the toddler room. It's impossible, right? Like we're not talking about childhood trauma that may come up or anger, like what triggers. We'll talk a little bit about like what makes you angry, but like I've never ever felt like the conversation has gotten to a point where I'm like, ooh, kids shouldn't be listening to this. When we're having like the sexuality talk, nope, we're not. We're calling it penises and vaginas because that's what kids need to hear anyway at any age, right? So like it just I've never, and maybe I just haven't really thought about it, but also it's never been, I think parents realize the kids are in the room and so we don't really, there's no negative talk. I think like they might be like it was a really hard week, but they're not saying my kid is being a monster, you know what I mean? I guess I guess the parents just kind of know, and we do talk like they understand a lot, but also I think a lot of times they're so busy playing. And sometimes the groups are old enough where we'll like take them down wagons, like up and down our little hallway. Like they'll leave the room and then they'll come back because we have a hallway end, and so kids will like run out. They'll bring baby strollers out or whatever. So sometimes they actually leave the room, but then they come back in. Um, but I just don't think there's really no topic because when we separate, that's when things can sometimes get deep, and that's sometimes when we get tears, but it just doesn't get that deep in those toddler classes because you can't. They're always in the middle of the circle and they're throwing things at people's heads and you're laughing. um yeah, I just can't. I'm trying now that you've put this in my head though, I'm like, is there anything? But I truly can't think that there's been ever any topic.
I don't think it's the topic as much as it is the personal sharing that
Mm-hmm.
has the potential for being harmful, when a parent really needs to vent things that they're struggling with,
Mm-hmm.
and the child hears it as a reflection on them. And I think I've been like you, Ellen, where it hasn't really been a problem, and so I haven't thought of it. But what
Mm-hmm.
a gift to have this question so I can be thinking about it before it's a problem, and maybe be considering adding this into our dialogue in a small group that has children present.
Mhm.
And I'm almost wondering, like, maybe I am overthinking it just because I am parenting this particular personality. Um, and so maybe my perception and like is a little skewed on like what generally a 1 year old would. I mean, we do a gradual separation and we have been the whole time I've been here. My two children's teachers are incredible humans and just like thrive with helping these little people learn how to separate from their caregivers. We really try and support our parents. We just have had a handful of parents that just aren't ready for it. And so we're trying to support them in ECFE as well so that they feel included in our program. I'm just trying to, and again, maybe I'm overthinking it. I watch my own kid and I'm just like, oh, I don't want another parent to have to backtrack some of the stuff I'm backtracking.
Even if it's not a problem for most classes, though, I don't think this is overthinking. I think this is like very thoughtful, like that any class would benefit from at least talking about what are we saying in front of our kids and having that be something front of mind before there's lots of parenting sharing.
Yeah. I also had a
Well,
parent come in today who I know she's overwhelmed. I know she's struggling. We've had a lot of conversations about it, but like with her child fussing at her ankles, like audibly was just like expressed her frustration to me with her child standing right there. And I'm like, I don't want to dismiss her feeling in that moment, but I'm also just like, we're going to get 15 minutes in the parent ed room to have this conversation. And with your child at your ankles, having a hard time right now is not when we're going to address this.
Mhm.
I think
I keep thinking, oh, I'm sorry, Greta, go ahead.
that's okay.
No, I
I
was
have like 15 things,
I
right?
listen, as I listen to this, being more in the real world or in the outer world rather than just that in the classroom. I just think about also the conversation of that will be helpful to parents beyond the classroom, right? So what kind of conversations are your children hearing at home? What are they hearing what do you want them to hear and not want them to hear when they're at Target? When they're, at the park? What are the boundaries that you would place yourself? I take my dog to the dog park and I hear, random people talking different things. And it's just like, if I had a kid, I don't know if I'd want him to be around this, right? And so, Naomi, I think it's an incredibly critical question that I would also wonder about applying outside, right? To just help parents think themselves about the boundaries that they want or what are they comfortable with. And then also, I mean, I'll give you a personal, and then I'm thinking also outside the classroom, but also what do you want them to see? Right. So it's hearing and receptive language, but it's also some of those visuals and, sort of being media centric and all of that. It's so easy to have stuff on, like having a screen on, a TV on, the computer on or whatever, and that's for the adult. And you think that this tiny child isn't seeing it, right? But they are. And if that's repeated enough, it's just, I think, again, just a really important message to parents about being being intentional and being thoughtful and outside of their own personal space when they're in a closed space like a classroom, because this is a small developing human being that is an amazing little sponge, right? So thanks. Greta.
well, and I think there's a difference too between a parent saying, "Oh my gosh, we're not sleeping, we're teething, we had guests coming." That's very different, right? Like that is just you're talking about your day versus, my ex-boyfriend did this and then my mother-in-law, you know what I mean? So I think it depending on what's going on, you can like even if the child is there screaming in arms, I think sometimes it's more important for the parent to be heard even with the child screaming in arms if it's just, oh my God, what do I do with these, tantrums or whatever. Um, I think it depends on how the language that they're using, right? If they're just saying, "Gosh, it was a really hard week," that is fine. versus it's been a hard week because my mother did this and my boyfriend did this or my husband did, you know what I mean? Like that, you know what I mean? So I think sometimes it depends on how the conversation starts and where it's going. And then if it starts to get too emotional or bigger, then you can be like, I feel like this is a conversation maybe for a different time, or we can call on the phone. So I think you can kind of let some of those conversations, because parents are going to talk about tantrums and teething and diaper, like all of those things. They're just going to talk about that anyway with their kids around. And those are conversations that kids can be a part of, right? And I also think it's very important for children to hear their parents say, I'm having a hard time. I need a break. And that's okay, right? Like we're modeling that for our kids too. So it just kind of depends on if it's getting negative, I guess. And sometimes it goes negative really fast. Um, so I think we have to be okay as facilitators saying, you know what, I feel like this conversation is getting a little too murky, or, using strong words or things like that. And then you can I think we need to kind of put a cap on this or stick a pin in it later or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think as facilitators, we have to be okay with shutting a conversation down if it starts getting too hard in a non-separating class.
Um, you guys are all just well said. I just love everything that you guys are talking about. And I have to admit, with Nancy and Becca, I have not thought about talking about this as a lesson. And I think it's a fabulous ground rule topic to bring up, because I'm thinking of, we talk about it on the spot, like if a baby's or if a child's crying and they want to come into the parent room, and we say, I mean, parents can go, is how we kind of do it here. Not like, you know what I mean? But they go to the kids. We don't bring kids into the parent room because we want to be able to have those hard conversations if they do come up. It's just kind of and it does happen at times. I'm not saying there's this hard, fast rule, but that's kind of how we practice it. And we say it's because we will have little ears in the room. We want to be careful around little ears. So why not expand that into a lesson about receptive language, right? It makes so much sense. And the other thing is, if I had a lesson on this, then I can even talk about during interaction time when the parents are over here going, and they're talking, right? And it could expand into that we're here to, not only the guidance of, this is an interaction time for you and your child together, away from home, away from all the stuff, but it's also a time when they're hearing what you have to say and they're listening to your conversation. I mean, if that was the lesson, and I think that's fabulous. Okay, I took my little notes because you guys were all talking. Like, my brain can't remember things long enough. So, yeah. So, okay. And then brain science. So thinking about, I agree with you, Ellen, that there's times and places where we need to go here, and there's also a need. So there's a need to have a place where you can come as you are, and we want to be supportive and encouraging, and so that we don't stay in those murky places too. So that would be another thing in that 1-year-old non-separating class. It would be, if you were to teach it, we would say, yeah, we're going to touch on those things. We're going to be there with each other, and we're going to move through into other things at time, so that we don't stay just for the wellness, right? The oxytocin that we want for bonding with these other parents, for the decrease in cortisol, because we don't want to be sick and inflamed, all that jazz, right? Whatever. Sorry. Okay. So the last thing was, I wonder if it's a systems thing too, Naomi, the idea of, we have had 1-year-old classes that separate and some that don't, so that people have a choice if they really want to be a part of an environment, if they want to. So they're like the older toddlers classes and the younger toddler classes, and there's an overlap there, so that sometimes if they can decide, we're not ready yet, we're going to stay here, and then those that move on. So that's another way. Ellen, I wanted to know, what do you guys do for mixed ages? What is your mixed ages? Does it not start until 2 then for separate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if kids are 2.5 by September 1st or January 1st, then we do separating. And so then it's 2.5 and on up till kindergarten entrance. So we'll have 2.5-year-olds together with fours, and occasionally you get a five, not very often, but occasionally a five, which is great. We love it because those 4 and 5-year-olds are really great role models for those little 2.5-year-olds. Sometimes we have a 2.5-year-old who is not super ready for that room because that's where we have little pieces, right? We have more in our toddler room. We just usually have like easel art, table art, Play-Doh, a sensory bin. But in the preschool room, we have a sensory bin and a sand table and an art table and fine motor, Play-Doh. We have a lot of things. And sometimes we get those 2.5-year-olds who are still really putting things in their mouth. Um, so sometimes we encourage some parents to stay in the non-separating toddler room for another session, but
Mhm.
also sometimes it's nice because sometimes the 2.5-year-olds that we're worried about and parents aren't worried about, they go into that preschool room and they stand out because they're not able to um, sit and focus on something. They're still bouncing, bounce, 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 like a toddler. So sometimes parents get in that room and they're like, oh, my child seems a little young for this room. And we're like, but they're like 2.5 or 3. And we're like, yeah, let's talk about that, you know?
I have a question.
So
Is that a separate room from the other room? Is that what you're saying? Or is it the same room?
yes,
You turned it over. Okay. Sometimes
no,
you
so
guys have
they,
opportunity to have a separate room for your littles and biggers. I just like district wide. I'm just curious. Do you have kind of no? Don, do you guys have separate age rooms? No. Okay. Carissa, no. Because we have to turn everything over. So is our yeah.
that's how it was in my last district. And we just had a cabinet. So like the cabinet would be open with toddler toys, and then we would close that cabinet for other, older groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
But we
have
do have two
we
separate
have
rooms.
3 rooms, but we almost always have 2 classes running at the same time. So they're slightly geared differently. We have one large room that doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, and that one is really great for the infants and the toddlers, the non-separating classes. There's more room for the parents to be with the kids in that space, and there's none of the little things. And then we have like the preschool room, and those rooms are actually like attached. There's a door between them, not going into the hall. So if we have a really big class, we use both rooms. And then across the hall, we have a room that's like kind of perfect for twos, twos and threes, like that kind of like slightly above the toddlers. But sometimes you're in a room that's not completely ideal, but we try to kind of have them slightly different. So we're
Mhm.
lucky with that. 3 rooms for 2 classes. So there's usually some flexibility there.
We're in new space this year, and when we set it up, we tried to kind of that was the attempt anyway in the beginning, put these really older kid toys, I'm talking about for 4s and 5s in this cabinet that could be flipped around, general stuff in an opening cabinet, and then infant stuff up where it could be reached by parents or by staff if needed to. So it's a pretty cozy room. So we're making do. In the past, whatever early childhood teacher was co-teaching with the parent educator, they hosted the children, parents and children's for interaction time, and then the children during separation time. So this is the first time we've had a designated space that we call the ECFE room. So we're learning. It's a work in progress, right, Don?
Yeah, thanks for answering the question. I know we kind of took it off of Naomi for a second. We can get back to that topic, but I was just curious, as around the state, how flexible are programs, how many resources each of us have, and how that interplays with how we can provide programming. And
At my last place, Delano, I had 4 classrooms. So I had the 2.5 to 5-year-old classroom set up with all that stuff. I had the infant and toddlers classroom. We had a dedicated parent education conference room. And then we had a very small sibling care room because a lot of times there'd only be 1 or 2 kids, and then they could walk the halls or go to the gym or go to the large motor room or maybe go outside even, depending on, excuse me, the day and how many people were there. So that was huge. And coming here and having just one assigned classroom like broke my heart. But we're growing. So as we grow, maybe I can push more for more space because we have more space in this building.
And I know that there's some districts out there that only have multi-age classes. They don't have age specifics. They just don't have the space, the staff, the population to do the variety because they're where they're at. And yeah, so it's fascinating to hear the variety and then what it means you can do. So like you can have, if you have an infant room, then you can, or if you, I'm more so if you have the older room, you don't have to worry about the infants. That's where we start running into challenges. It's like, okay, well, the babies are going to climb the climber, so we have to close the climber down. So the babies are going to do this, so we have to shut that door. And we really try to get very systematic, and so it's efficient to do it. But yeah, that's fascinating. It's to hear. Sorry, thank you. Naomi, back to what did you hear? Did you get, how do you feel?
No, it's good to hear.
Question.
I appreciate all of the thoughts, and yes, no, it's helpful to hear. And we run full year classes. I pushed back and suggested maybe we consider sessions for some of our classes, especially this non-separating format, but I got pushback from everyone else. No one agreed with me, so I was like, okay, I can go with what everyone else is doing. But to answer your question, Greta, our space, we have one classroom that's infant toddler, so we don't run them at the same time, but we'll run one back to back. We have we use a 2-year-old preschool classroom as the 2-year-old ECFE room on the day that those students are not in class. And then we have another 2-year-old ECFE room that is for our program that's 2 days a week. And it's an ECFE transition to preschool type setup. And so that 2-year-old teacher, that is her classroom always. And then we'll run our multi-age classes in that classroom. I'm currently running a 1-year-old classroom in that room on Tuesday nights, and we've done it 2 years in a row, and we're finally pushing back and looking to explore different spaces because it's just not 1-year-old appropriate. And the teacher in the classroom is like, they're getting into everything. I was like, well, yeah, they're 1. That's what they're supposed to do.
I remember teaching a mixed stage that was just the little in 1990 something and it was in a kindergarten classroom and we had to just transition the whole kindergarten room. That's what we did. It's so tricky, isn't it? It's like it can take a lot of energy, and that was toting everything in every week, every evening class. I'm sure Don has some memories of doing things like that, and maybe Nancy too. I won't age anybody else, but I'm considering you in my cohort.
We still are. We
We
still
still
are
are.
essentially, yeah. When you've got one room, you've got to, yeah. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Into a kindergarten classroom?
Oh, no. Sorry. No, but if you've got 4-year-old preschool,
Yes.
yeah, anyway.
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
I just wanted to see if, oh, what's that, Ellen? What are you showing
Hi,
us?
Jules. I'm showing you the mistletoes that I make in my baby class. And there's Jules. Hi, Jules. Hang on. It's good. They'll be fine. No, I do ornament mistletoes for my babies. So if you're looking for an ornament idea, and the moms love it. And then I like to set them all up next to each other, like, look at this tiny foot next to this giant foot. And they think it's hilarious. So anyway, I just had to show you that in the little lull. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. No, I was just going to check in with Carissa. Welcome again, Carissa. And you've been hearing our conversation, supporting Naomi with her question about having non-separating classes and little ears. And I love that title, Becca. Little ears that are very, very perceptive, and having a conversation with parents about sort of ground rules about what you can talk about or what you should talk about or not, and things like that. Have you experienced that with your young children's classes at all?
I guess I've been lucky because I do teach littles. I teach 10, well, I teach babies, I teach 10 to 17 months, and then we have a 18 to 23 month that are all non-separating. So, and I've never done, yeah, like Greta said, it actually didn't really even occur to me, but it totally makes sense to do something like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like it's not been a big issue either, where I think parents are pretty thoughtful, I guess, about that. And maybe I don't even know they're being thoughtful, they're just not doing it. But it is a good thing to think about ahead of time. You know, one of those things, like think about it ahead of time so you're not like put on the spot when it all of a sudden starts coming out and you're not prepared for it. Um, yeah.
It's interesting that you have classes at the very specific months like that. I've heard of classes.
I know a lot of districts don't. They do like the full year and then because then we do the full 2-year-old year. We do 24 to 30 whatever months, the full 2-year-old year. It's just it's worked out well and we've talked over and over again about maybe switching that up and we always land on not switching it up. Um, and those groups do especially the 10 to 17 months is we offer two of them at each site because we have two different sites, but and they do tend to be smaller, but it just keeps working well and it feels right. And we just have one classroom for everybody. We do multi-age. So we do try to really keep it all appropriate. So maybe some stuff is sort of young for, especially for that 2-year-old year when they're getting to the end of the year, but they also seem fine with it. And like, sensory is tricky with especially that 10 to 17 months. So I try to think of it more as like a learning experience, more for the parents actually than the kiddos on how to direct sensory play so everything's not going in the mouth or what to do when it is going in the mouth, and lots of modeling for parents around that. And I don't know, it there's some tricky spots, but it works out all right.
Mhm.
I feel like
So
some of
Carissa,
that.
oh, sorry. Carissa, maybe you said, are they all school year long? Your classes, they start the year at 10 to 17 months and got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we halfway through the year, the sensory table is much more appropriate or they're doing better with it. I mean, it's funny, they're like this sometimes, trying to get into the sensory table at the beginning of the year. It's so cute, but I don't know. It's also fun to see when now they're here at the end of the year, right? And like, wow, look at how far we've come. And they can play in the beans without putting them in their mouths. And we've learned so much along the way. So
I struggle with that with my infants class. Number one, I'll just say my favorite is multi-age because I really, really love multi-age. But that aside, when we have age separate class, I do all the infant classes, and I was able to convince my boss to let us do it split. So first I teach the 0 to 6 months, and then I do the 7 to 12 months. It used to just be one class of birth to 12 months, but we run our class for like the year. So, I mean, it's technically 2 semesters, but it's run like a year-long class. And so that's your birthday as of September 1st. Well, what I'm running into is even with separating it like that, that's great. But you may have a baby who was just 6 months. And so they're in the birth to 6 month class in September. And then you get a new baby who joins the group who's born in February. And all of a sudden it's like, this is not age specific at all, like at all. So as she's thinking about like programming for next year, I'm kind of curious if maybe it's like second semester, do we add a third section of infants, so that it can be the new babies? And would we have enough? Because I love being age specific for the babies. Like, I think that's so good for them. Um, but I really, especially for the parents, don't like, okay, you're done with this class now. I really like the building of community and whatnot for the full year. Like, I really love that. I don't want to let go of, okay, you're out of this class now. You have to go to the other one. Even if I would still be the one teaching it, like they've formed relationships with the other parents and stuff. And I like watching that build and grow. So I haven't found a super happy solution to age specific with littles. That's been kind of hard. Yeah. Greta's comment is perfect.
Yeah, that's been, I guess we haven't actually had it happen yet, but last year we ran a Friday morning babies, which was packed full right from the beginning. And then we ended with a late list. So we started one second semester, we started another one. And so they were just sort of the way it worked out, they were all younger. And then for this year, we offered both of them from the beginning. And the second one is running and the Friday morning one didn't. But now I'm like, well, I've just been thinking about this, that like maybe we should like kind of close. It's technically still open, but nobody's registering for it because we thought, well, maybe we'll get some people and we'll still be able to run it. But now do we sort of shut it down now and like rebrand it for second semester as a younger
Right.
baby?
Like my 7 to 12 month class, it's 7, which is kind of a lovely because they're just getting to be really mobile and busy. So it's a really nice size. I think I have 7 families and it's the exact same 7 families sign up for second semester, no new ones. But my 0 to 6 month class is just like growing.
I think I've heard, Becca, some districts, they say the date, 10 to 17 months as of September 1st, right? So
Ours is all as of September
okay.
1st.
So
But
then
then
it's
if you get born from then on, that's where the young infants class gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
right, but they
Well,
wouldn't be out of your age group, right? They would still be with their peers, let's call it, right? They'd still be with the
They'd be with their class year
kids.
age peers, but just a year is huge when you're a baby.
Right, right. And then maybe have a smaller age group. Yeah, that's a good question. Adding a new one in the spring,
In
but
the
that's
spring,
tricky
maybe.
because
That's what I'm wondering, but that's a
you have to leave a
logistical
spot
nightmare for
open,
my supervisor. It's like
right?
you're
Well,
gonna
you
have
have
an
to leave it
additional class.
open, a spot for them when you're going to add it. Then that's tricky. We do that for 3.5-year-olds in the spring that are not in preschool, but going to preschool, not kindergarten in the fall. So that
A
they
lot.
have like a preschool, but they're not going into kindergarten. They're just young and they just didn't go to preschool as a 3-year-old, right? So they're coming to an ECFE class specific for peak into preschool, so to speak, or whatever. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it's tricky in those ages.
We
well,
have
and I'm a little worried too if we do rebrand it and have the littles for second semester, then that affects next year because our normal baby is birth to 9 months. So some of those babies will potentially have to do babies again because they're not going to be old enough for movers. And then what? And I was like, well, we'll deal with that if we have to. I don't know. But it gets tricky.
So I've got kind of a situation now where my baby class is 3 to 12 months. But we kind of go case by case because if they're not super mobile, and I have one right now that she has just started crawling at 12 months, she will get plowed down in our evening class. So I'm going to actually let her stay in my evening baby class. And then we'll reevaluate in the spring, right? She might be more mobile in April. And so we'll kind of worry about it there. But I mean, unfortunately, sometimes they do kind of bond and they get left behind. I we can't like you know what I mean? We're like, I'm sorry, your kiddo is too big for this room. They have to move on, and then they see their friends eventually anyway. So it stinks when they have those relationships and you have to move them on. But also like we can't have new toddlers, new movers new walkers coming up, and 2.5-year-olds who are like running. You know what I mean? And just big body play. So it sucks, but like I'm like, sorry, like you guys, you'll get together eventually in the non-separating class, and then you can stay together for 2 and 3 years. But it's at the toddler and the baby level. Sometimes they just miss out on each
Do
other.
you have that written down like in the class description? Because I've seen that before too, where they'll say for walkers, and they might even have some of the same overlap of ages, but they'll say walkers, and they'll say non-walking or something like
Kind
that.
of. I mean, kind of. We've also had kids who were not ready to separate, like at 3. Some kids with some higher anxiety. We've had kiddos with special needs who are 3 and still in that room. So if they're not mobile, we're just not comfortable moving them on. Do you know what I mean? From the baby class if they're not mobile. So we don't have it for walkers because sometimes those kids aren't like they're not ready. So like if you have a 14-month-old in a baby class, but there's an influx of new babies, get that class isn't going to be good for them anymore. They're playing, they're maybe babbling, they're playing differently, they're babbling, they're eating actual food. And then I've got these 12-week-old babies who are coming up for my newborn class. The conversations are not going to fit. And so they, but they're not walking. It's just it's hard. So it's kind of a case by case. And sometimes we have families who come into the toddler class and their baby is too little or developmentally delayed. And we're like, you know what? This class is better for you. And we bump them down to the baby class. So our ages were a little softer the younger they are, but as they get older, time to go.
What a fabulous conversation. Again, I just love watching the process of and this is what happens with our introductions, right? That can take 4 hours. Is one thing spurs something else, spurs something else, spurs something else, and it's so creative and supportive, and it all like is part of this big schmear that is the what we all do. So thank you, everyone. Just a few notes. So we will not meet next week on November 29th. Happy Thanksgiving. And then the next 2 Fridays, the link will be open. I will not be here. I'm going to be in France. And then, but again, the link is open, so you all can chat. But because it's tied to my UMN account, it can't be recorded unless Shannon was there or something like that. But so yes, the 16th, yes, the 13th, and then yes, on the 20th, I'll be back and we will be recording. Then we'll say no on the 27th because it's December 27th. But then we will be meeting again on January 3rd. So but that's all there in the chat, and I'll probably put it out on Perfect Connections too. So I wish you all well. I'll miss you for the next few weeks. I hope you all have wonderful Thanksgivings, whatever that means to you, and your family. And thank you, Greta, for giving us that link to the conversation about disagreements, because they will happen, whether it's families getting together for Thanksgiving or just casual conversation with people. So anyway, so thank you all. I love you and I will miss you. And see you in a few weeks.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.